There's got to be some happy medium in how I work. It's where at the end of a session, I don't just end up with an absolute disaster across the studio. But I find it with myself in the heat of the moment when people are here paying for it, I'm just going a mile a minute. I don't even think about straightening. Thankfully, I'm busy here, and that's why I'm not putting out as many videos as normal, so I apologize for that. There's some fun stuff coming. I've got like 4 or 5 videos in the tank that are currently being filmed over a long period of time, and they're going to start trickling in. So get excited for those, because I am. What I wanted to talk about was turning the recording studio into a business. What are things you absolutely need? And I saw this on a power washing video randomly enough, and it coincides directly with the conversation that I just had with the individuals who were here. I'll put a link to him in the description below. Go check out his video, because I think it's very applicable to what we do. So what are things that you need to do if you want to turn your recording studio recording hobby into a business? Still need to make that over-under video, I know. If you guys actually want that, I kind of said it as a joke, but I'll do it in fast motion while we talk. How about that? So if you're interested in recording a recording studio and you've done this for as long as you can remember in your past and you want to turn it into something lucrative or a business, basically 4 things that I can think of that you need to do or get. And the first one you need to do is to self-reflect. You need to actually sit down and think, do you have the ability to do this? If you have a full-time job or you have a part-time job, do you have the time that you need to put into this? That is different for literally everybody. Having the time to do something and the time that you can put into something directly reflects on what your own vision of success is. And I've talked about this in numerous videos. There's a difference between like being the absolute best and then being successful enough to put food on your table, to pay your rent, to put a little money back for you and your family. I kind of subscribe to the latter as being successful, and there's a whole lot of people who have commented on videos that I do and would say that I'm not successful. That's absolutely fine. Your vision of success does not have to be determined or defined by anyone else but you. Are you happy doing what you're doing? Are you able to do what you're doing? Can you physically do what you're doing? You can't be in 2 places at once. Does the time that you have allow you to do something like this? And in the beginning, the hours are going to be a lot harder than once you get settled into a gig like this. There are going to be some late nights because that's when bands want to work. You may or may not have early mornings with your other family stuff or jobs that you have. Are you able to do this? Do you have a space to do this within? Are you in an apartment that even allows you code-wise to do something like this? Do you have access to an extra room you could turn into something? Because not all of this stuff in a recording studio, recording business requires you to have clients come to where you are. A fair amount of my business is done remotely. So I rarely see those individuals, if ever. They could care less if I'm in a commercial space or not. The commercial space affords me the ability to physically bring people here and work, which I also do a lot. So do you have the ability and the want to actually do this? And I'm not saying that to like scare anybody away. Actually sit and think about it. How much time can you give? Build yourself some actual constraints here. What I can tell you, and this isn't going to work for everyone, but what works for me is when I started drawing hard lines and telling clients that I'm not going to work outside of 10 to 6. They didn't really care. The ones who weren't going to come back didn't, but the ones who respect that line, I'm setting a precedent for all future work. And it has not been a deterrent for work for me, or at least I haven't personally noticed that. So think about all of those things. So the next thing would be money. And this is not to say that you need a ton of money to start something like this. It helps. Just that you have your finances in order to a point that you know how much it's going to cost for you to live in a month. And that can look like a whole lot of different things for a whole lot of different people. And this seems really basic, but this comes up a lot in consults that I have or individuals who want to talk about the business side of a recording studio. I just talked to a buddy about this last week. Things that seem super obvious that when you get in the moment of actually breaking ground in an actual space, things are easily like forgotten for some reason. And these are the things that haunted me when I was opening my business. I obsess over exactly how much money goes out every month. And that's going to be different for everybody. Food, living costs, family costs. Does your kid's school? Do you have to put some back for health insurance? Think about every little individual cost. Add in things that you want to reinvest into the studio. So do you need to buy some gear? Have a wish list, things that you're saving for. All the while, you're putting money back into like a rainy day fund, an emergency fund. When you're starting a business like this, you need to have a few months ready to go in the event of an emergency. The last thing you want to do is start stacking up credit cards. And I know people who've done this, and for some people it works. But for me, that's horribly, horribly frightening to think that I would be running a business and needing credit cards to do it. Maybe that's the capital you need to get rolling. I tend to be a little more of a scaredy cat in that realm. I'm not going to buy it unless I have the money to pay for it. And I realize that's not the case for everyone out there. So when you go into debt, you do it smart. If you know your monthly expenses and generally what you're going to bring in month to month, you can make those educated decisions. Not to say that I haven't gone into debt before. When I bought my burls, that was the most debt I had ever incurred, but we took care of it in a smart way, weighing out those options. What can we do? What can't we do? And for you family guys like me, that's a discussion with your family too. Hopefully you're putting all these people around you who support you in the loop with you so that they know what's happening as well. Obviously, to each their own in that aspect. I like to communicate as much as possible, especially when it comes to things like money. It makes you happier, it makes everybody around you a little happier, and it makes the way you have a relationship with money evident to your clients as well. So the way you start talking about money with them comes out really naturally because one, you're not afraid of it, and two, you're not really in the mindset of hoarding it. Money is a tool now. You're a business. You're thinking about it maybe like a video game, like it's a resource. Maybe that's just me. So the next one's going to be gear and equipment, and this one might get a little controversial, I suppose. Can you do this with cheap gear? Absolutely. Hit records have been made in bedrooms with Audio-Technica 2020s, which is no slouch, but it's a $99 mic. You can make killer stuff on that. The question then becomes, can you do it versus should you do it? And then you need to look at how you're operating your business. Do you have people coming in and paying for the space? When you start talking about investments that you're going to make in your space, dependability comes into question, speed comes into question, because the faster you can work, the less that your client is going to spend, the better their overall project is going to be. Because if you're hung up on equipment, working even a fraction slower on something that's maybe not purpose-built for exactly what you're trying to do, that can translate into stress, people getting in their heads, they start looking at their watch a little more, and that just slows stuff down. Now, I'm not saying you need to go out and buy the most expensive gear, not at all. You find what works for you, and you stick with it. The thing you don't want to do, and the thing that I was honestly making mistakes of early on in my career, I was getting the next best thing each time. And that's kind of the bane with interfaces. It's easy to think you have this one certain piece of gear. Now there's a new generation. I need that. I think there's value in figuring out what each one does and how it could benefit you, but you really shouldn't be hopping every year to the newest thing. That's not how you take in this information. If in a perfect world, utopia, all other things being equal, you would buy the best, most dependable gear, reading a whole lot of reviews, getting opinions from a lot of different people, and purchasing the thing that's going to last the longest. For me, the burls were that kind of purchase. They weren't the first type of purchase like that for me. I wish I had done stuff like this earlier, especially for my monitoring, getting that right, because you're not going to get it perfect the first time. I spent way too long on monitors that were not telling me the truth or telling me what I needed to hear in that moment, especially not being matched with my room, so that no matter what gear I had in that space, no matter what interface or compressor or EQ that I just bought, I wasn't hearing accurately what it was doing to my signal. So I wish that was an area that I would have taken more seriously early. Other than that, if you have any amount of decent converters, your outboard gear can quickly become an investment that oftentimes has a better resale and a better investment structure than buying plugins. I'm a fan of plugins. I use plugins all the time, but my outboard gear, all the stuff in this rack has a resale value. My investment is dependent upon what I spent when I got it, right? A lot of these things I got broken. Some I didn't, but some of these pieces are going to be selling for far more than what I purchased them for. Take, for example, these old 1073s. Time when I spent the most money I'd ever spent, and now they're skyrocketing. My Inward Connections TSL4V right down here. This guy, at the time, was around a $2,000, $3,000 compressor. Now they're selling for $6,000 or $7,000 used because that company's not around anymore. You have no way to know what situations are going to be winners and what aren't going to be. Like, I will lose money on this distressor here, but I'm okay with that. Some plugins can cost you a couple $100s. The actual cost of ownership, even if I sell this at like the median price of what the used cost is gonna be, it'll cost me around $150 to $200 to have owned this for a decade. And not to say the price may go up, it may go down, but there is a resale value here. That's something to think about. And the last thing to think about here is education. You're never done learning in a career like this. I've seen a lot of people crash and burn when they think they know everything, or they start discounting where the industry's going. Not necessarily in thinking it's a fad, but maybe thinking that there's no value in this one particular direction that the industry's going in, and whether that's a sound or popular techniques or what one given niche of the industry is expecting as far as deliverables go. If you can settle on the fact that you can learn from every record out there, almost regardless of when that record was recorded, how it was recorded, whether or not you like the genre, then the world really starts to open up to you. And it's not even that, hey, I need to know exactly how the Beatles recorded this one particular record. It's more that mental space of curiosity and wanting to know the craft that gets you into this space of not sounding like everybody else. And that's a big thing. Even if you're not the best recording engineer out there, or you're not the best tracking engineer, or you're not the best mixing engineer, mastering engineer, whatever, producer, if you're different and you can lean into what an artist is trying to say, oftentimes that's going to get that artist more eyes. I mean, look at Phoebe Bridgers, for example. Not to say that that stuff was not recorded in a fantastic way. It absolutely was. But it's not necessarily a sound that you're used to hearing. Casey Musgraves, Butterflies. That won so many awards, and yet that drum sound and that intimacy and, I don't know, that like cushy thing that now feels so ubiquitous within that genre at the time wasn't really something that you expected. And that's kind of why it turned so many heads. Constantly learning these different things and what's K-pop doing, all these effects on the side, what they're doing with the vocal, an octave above, an octave below. These things can be applied to any genre or any song, but having those tools in your toolbox ready to pull out when you need something is so helpful, rather than just doing the same 3 or 4 tricks. People will start to eventually come to you because of a particular thing you do, even if you can't describe it. I don't know what my sound is, but I'm sure that I have one. But hopefully, I can be a ghost enough to where, unless you're really trying to pay attention to it, I'm not there. Having this education of this wide berth of music outside of my own 4 walls, hopefully, will give me enough tools for people to not know I was ever there on a record. There are some records now that I'm working on that I would have never expected in a million years to have ever worked on. And I don't think if you didn't know, you wouldn't know I was ever a part of it. Because I have tried to learn from so many different areas, and knowing when and when not to apply that education to certain things is just as much a tool in the tool bag as knowing what those tricks are. All this comes back to the artist. What does the artist want? And how quickly do you have that stuff in your head to be able to give to them? Constantly learning how to do it, constantly figuring out better ways to do it, optimizing, not just to do it faster, but quality. If you can do those 2 things, if you can do it better and you can do it faster, if we're talking about a business, that's what makes a successful business. If we want to dive into this on another video, there's definitely something to the fact that if you are a successful business, that is what's going to most impact your local music scene. If you're giving away too many services for free, if you're giving things away, if you're propping up an industry artificially, it's not going to be strong enough to walk on its own. That sounds really harsh, and that will probably get a lot of disagreement there. However, I strongly subscribe to the fact that you have to be sustainable as a person and as a business, and so do the groups that you're working with. And that starts with charging what you're worth. I'm not saying to overcharge. I'm not saying to gouge people. That's not the goal of this at all. But if you're a sustainable business, that serves your industry far more than trying to be the discount bargain bin of recording studios in your area. And that should be the target that you're trying to hit, is building up the industry as a whole around you, because rising tides raise all ships. So if I'm doing good, the bands around here are doing good. And it's honestly vice versa. Because they're doing well and they continue to need my services, I am also doing well. Let me know in the comments if you agree. Hit the like button if you like this one. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy, and I'll see you in the next one.